Bradley Roby is in, Latavius Murray is out, a new depth chart has been released, and Locked On does its own power rankings. There's so much on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ross Jackson here at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. You can find me over at Canal Street Chronicles, Locked On NFL, and of course here every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the huge acquisition for the New Orleans Saints, trading for cornerback Bradley Roby, what it means for the team, what it means for Roby, and how quickly will we see him out on the field. Then we're going to talk about Latavius Murray getting cut on Tuesday, what it means for the running back room, and of course, fan favorite Tony Jones Jr. And then we'll wrap up with a quick look at Locked On's power rankings. Where did the New Orleans Saints rank and why? And of course, a look at the first week one depth chart to be released for the team. We've got a ton on today's episode. And of course, we got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints, your team every day. All right, family, let's get right to it. A huge trade for the New Orleans Saints and perhaps their most important offseason move thus far, trading for former Houston Texans and Denver Broncos cornerback Bradley Roby. Why is this the most important move that they've made so far? Because it absolutely addresses a need. You might be able to put Quan Alexander there, but there's still a question mark here. When it comes to Bradley Roby, you know exactly what and who you're getting at that cornerback position opposite Marshawn Lattimore. Yes, he will leapfrog everybody in the cornerback room to be the cornerback too. And let's talk about a couple of reasons why. First of all, you traded for him, right? The New Orleans Saints have talked about with the players that are on the roster currently at this time, with the exception of Desmond Trufant, who basically comes in as a replacement for, let's say, Patrick Robinson, for instance. You've basically been talking and hearing this team talk about the cornerback position and addressing it as a must this entire offseason thus far. You heard it from head coach Sean Payton. You heard it from general manager Mickey Loomis. You heard it from Jeff Ireland. You heard it from everybody around the organization that this was going to be a move that they wanted to make. Not this move in particular for Bradley Roby, but addressing that cornerback position. Now, the Saints were not able to make any kind of a move for Xavier Howard, who got his new contract in Miami. Stephon Gilmore is on the physically unable to perform list, so he's not tradable. And then there's no way that the Patriots are also going to be able to move J.C. Jackson while having Stephon Gilmore unavailable for the first 6 games of their season. So with all or first 6 weeks of their season. So with all of that, this was the essentially next best corner available on the market, and still a very good one, and a good one for what the New Orleans Saints need. Scheme versatile, somebody can play both man and zone, somebody with a ton of NFL experience, former first rounder, and of course, an Ohio State Buckeye, because this just never gets old. So when you look at this cornerback position opposite Marshawn Lattimore, week one, you're going to see some combination of Ken Crawley, who is returning from injury, so we'll see how that all goes. Desmond Trufant, maybe, but highly unlikely considering that they just added him, and then potentially even rookie Paulson Adebo, depending upon Ken Crawley's health. But starting week 2, Bradley Roby will be available to you after serving a 1-game suspension for the beginning of the season. And at that point moving forward, your starting cornerback tandem will be and should be Bradley Roby at cornerback 2, with Marshawn Lattimore, of course, as your star cornerback 1. This is a fantastic tandem for the New Orleans Saints and gives them something akin to what they had in Janoris Jenkins last year. We saw Janoris Jenkins play just over 30% of man coverage snaps. We saw Bradley Roby last year play 34% of those man snaps, or 34% when it comes to man coverage over with the Houston Texans. He also graded extremely well as a zone corner last year, not allowing any touchdowns, racking up an interception, and allowing a passer rating under 80. So when you look at all of that combined, you see the scheme versatility in a player like Bradley Roby that a guy like Dennis Allen loves for his defensive scheme and defensive system. In those man coverage snaps, Bradley Roby last year allowed only a 56.4 completion percentage, including forcing incompletions on 25% of his targets. That's 4 out of 16. However, he did allow 2 passing touchdowns there, had no interceptions in man coverage. So, maybe you can look at that as being something that the Saints can address, but you're going to see a player that's going to fit in very nicely, just like Janoris Jenkins did last year when it comes to this New Orleans Saints defense and scheme. Now, we talked a little bit about this already, but just to make sure that it's fully said, Bradley Roby does have a 1-game suspension here at the beginning of the 2021 season. That's why you're not going to see him against the Green Bay Packers, but you should expect to see him starting opposite Marshawn Lattimore, beginning with the Carolina Panthers game, and really just in time for a Joe Brady offense that may or may not have all the pieces that they need to be able to get rolling there. But you'd rather the New Orleans Saints not be weak at one of the cornerback positions going into that, because you don't want to find out if they have all the pieces. You don't want the Saints to be the team that they figure things out against, right? That's a division opponent early on in the season. A lot of question marks for both teams going into the season. So good to have this feeling of certainty finally opposite Marshawn Lattimore at the cornerback spot. Ken Crawley, look, nothing's been overblown about him over the course of this offseason. I saw him in training camp. He was fantastic throughout camp. Everyone got to see it during preseason as well. So there's no real mystery there that he was performing well. The mystery was, are you able to translate that to regular season action? Now the New Orleans Saints don't have to lead with uncertainty in order to hopefully get production. Now they can trust that they're going to have reliable production from a corner like Bradley Roby. Now, what this means for Bradley Roby, who's due around $9 million as he comes to the New Orleans Saints, $10 million in 2022. The New Orleans Saints have just under $6 million available in salary cap space after you add in practice squad, the bottom 2 out of the 53-man roster, all of that. So the New Orleans Saints will have to do something in order to make the money work. But instead of doing anything across the team, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Saints instead just extend or restructure Bradley Roby's contract, since all of that money, the $9 million this year and the $10 million next year, is all non-guaranteed. So you can give him some guaranteed money by restructuring his contract, make him a little bit happier in terms of what his contract situation is that way. He still gets some money from the Texans for this year in terms of what was left on his guaranteed contract. But when it comes down to it, the Saints are easily going to be able to make this work within their salary cap limits. And remember, Marshawn Lattimore is also still looking for an extension before week 1. There's still time to get that done. However, that extension probably won't factor much into the Saints salary cap space this year, since they already restructured his contract into voidable years out of his 5th-year option. So don't expect to see any type of an extension with Marshawn Lattimore having too much of an impact on the ability to keep around Bradley Roby. You'll still have to probably restructure Bradley Roby to get him to fit under what you have available in the salary cap. And then after that, smooth sailing for the New Orleans Saints, hopefully to be able to roll over as much of that saved salary cap space going into the 2022 season, where they're already well over the salary cap while being well under the roster limit. So good news for the New Orleans Saints here, built-in device to be able to help them make this move happen. And the move itself, huge for the New Orleans Saints going into a 2021 season where they do not intend to just lay down and roll over. They want to compete. Bradley Roby is going to help them do that on the defensive side. So the trade for Bradley Roby, not the only big roster move, however. They also released and moved on from Latavius Murray. We're going to talk about why they made that decision, what it means for the team, and what it means for fan favorite Tony Jones Jr. as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get to that, the New Orleans Saints right now have a win total over under 9 wins over with our friends at BetOnline.ag, and they're favored right now to finish somewhere between 5 to 9 wins. So according to BetOnline.ag, they think that they are odds on to fall under that 9-win total. If you agree with that, you can head over to BetOnline.ag, pick some of the favorites that are there, or if you disagree, I would certainly be betting against this one, especially if you're feeling confident with the addition of Bradley Roby. You think they can get to 10 wins, 11 wins on the season? This is the line for you, as well as several other things that you can take part in as well and get in on that action, not just with the NFL, but the MLB, your favorite Vegas casino games, and much more, including contests like their $500,000 big time contest they have going on right now. They also have a $200,000 survivor pool, and of course, kickoff tomorrow between the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You want to get in on that as a new customer. You can use the promo code NFL100, and if you lose a wager on that game, you can get it back up to $25. And they're also giving a 100% welcome bonus over at the site as well. So go and check them out today. BetOnline.ag, BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Don't forget to check out the Ultimate Season Preview 2021 as it wraps up as well. Go ahead and check it out wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to talk about Latavius Murray and the New Orleans Saints moving on from a running back who had a solid 2 seasons with them behind Alvin Kamara, had 3 100-plus yard games. several more successful games, multi-touchdown games, all of that. But the New Orleans Saints move on from Latavius Murray and send Tim Packen on Tuesday. The big question is why? And it seems that according to the reports, the New Orleans Saints went to Latavius Murray and asked him if he'd be willing to take a pay cut or a pay reduction. He said no, and so the New Orleans Saints ended up moving on from him. According to Sean Payton, who addressed this earlier this morning, Tony Jones Jr. earned the running back 2 role in his eyes throughout training camp last year, training camp this year, and of course the preseason where everyone else sort of figured it out. So when it comes down to it, the New Orleans Saints were not about to pay Latavius Murray $2.6 million or so to be their 3rd running back. If they were going to go ahead and put Tony Jones Jr. ahead of him anyway, then the money that they were spending versus what they were going to get in return just didn't add up. So Latavius Murray now on the market has the opportunity to land with another running back needy team, the New York Jets, the Miami Dolphins, potentially even the Baltimore Ravens, Detroit Lions, lots of options for him, and certainly he'll land with another team, I expect, pretty quickly. But what will the New Orleans Saints now do at the running back position behind Alvin Kamara without Latavius Murray? As we just mentioned, Tony Jones Jr. is expected to be the running back 2, and I don't think that that's surprising. You look at him and what he's contributed not only as a runner between the tackles, but also as a pass blocker and as a pass catcher out of the backfield. You saw him with several touches in a variety of different ways throughout the preseason and certainly throughout camp as well. You saw him now change his number from 37 to 21, so he's ready to be out there and be a full-time running back for the New Orleans Saints. Or not full-time, but full-time in terms of the share between he and Alvin Kamara. So with Alvin Kamara being your star guy, you need to have a reliable somebody right behind him. And Tony Jones Jr. looks to be in line to be that guy in 2021. The New Orleans Saints, very unlikely, I think, to add another running back to the active roster, but look for them to potentially add somebody like Stevie Scott, who was released just a few days ago by the Denver Broncos after he spent some time with the Saints early on in training camp as well as the preseason. Could potentially see him land on the practice squad. And the New Orleans Saints, of course, will still have their 3rd running back behind Tony Jones Jr. with Dwayne Washington. The Saints effectively walking in with the same structure that they had last season. Yes, they technically kept 4 running backs last season because they had Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, Dwayne Washington, and Ty Montgomery. But if you look at his snap distribution early on in 2020, he was a wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. Ty Montgomery was. He was not a backup running back and didn't have to be a backup running back until the Saints had no running backs in week 17. So he ended up being a full-time running back for them in that game and had a very successful game against the Panthers in doing so, rushing for over 100 yards himself. Now you look at what Tony Jones Jr. did not only as a power runner, but also as a zone runner during the preseason. That fits in extremely well with what the New Orleans Saints want to be able to do, even when Alvin Kamara is not in the game. They are an athletic offensive line. They want to get out and run. They want to get to the second level. And one of the ways they do that is by gap blocking or zone blocking schemes. And of course, Tony Jones Jr. fit in right with that system. So that's now the outlook at the running back position for the New Orleans Saints. Moving on from Latavius Murray does save the team around $2.3 million. But we'll have to see what the addition of Desmond Trufant does to that number, how much he's getting paid. We don't know what his contract terms are at this time. Latavius Murray was the 4th or ended up being the 4th corresponding move for the 4 players that the Saints added before they traded for Bradley Roby. So with that being the case, you could still see another corresponding move down the road to open up a roster spot for Bradley Roby, depending upon what the trade compensation was from the New Orleans Saints. They include a player, so on and so forth. So still some to figure out, but that's, I think, what you're going to see at the running back position in 2021 for these New Orleans Saints. Coming up next, though, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about exactly that by looking at the New Orleans Saints depth chart that they released, the week 1 depth chart that they put out early, and then we'll wrap up with a look at Locked On's power rankings of where the New Orleans Saints fall there as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And before we get to any of that, want to remind you about the best tasting protein bar on the market, our good friends over at BuiltBar.com. 15% off by using the promo code LOCKED15. Let me tell you why you want to know that. Because these protein bars are incredible. Covered in 100% chocolate, phenomenal flavors, including coconut, coconut almond, peanut butter brownie. If you like fruit and chocolate, there's strawberry. There's also orange. There's raspberry. There's a ton of options for you. And they have something for everybody. You have a sweet tooth. You've got salted caramel. You got cookies and cream. And I know it sounds super sweet. And you're probably thinking, Ross, that's probably a ton of sugar. 4 or 5 grams. 4 or 5 grams of sugar, you heard me right. 17, 18 grams of protein and about 130 to 180 calories per bar. These things are absolutely incredible. They are indeed bars. Now, let's go ahead and tell you a little bit more about how you can check them out yourself. You can get a sample box, get 2 of all 9 of the standard flavors, but don't forget to always continue to check around for limited edition flavors, limited edition products that pop up as well. Once again, that promo code is LOCKED15, LOCKED15 at BuiltBar.com in order to get 15% off of your first order or your next order. Doesn't matter. That's promo code LOCKED15 at BuiltBar.com. And want to remind you one more time about our good friends over at RunYourPool. I want to remind you one more time to jump into the Locked On Saints Survivor Pool. The season starts tomorrow, so last chance. Get in on the action right away and make your weekends more action-packed by having something to root for when it comes to all of these games. Maybe you're not a fantasy football person. You don't pay enough attention to weekly matchups and individual players and all that. I completely understand. It's a lot of work. Not all of us are spreadsheet people. You don't need to be one of those folks, though, to be able to have something fun to do with your friends, your family, other people that don't do fantasy football that you want to get involved with. You want to make these games more fun to watch. Run Your Pool helps you do it. So go and check them out over at runyourpool.com/lockedon so you can get $10 off. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon, or use the promo code lockedon at checkout. Don't forget to sign up for the Locked On Saints pool, though, which you can find in the description, links in the description, wherever it is, however it is that you're taking in the show. Anywhere you are, everywhere that you can be, they have you covered. Run Your Pool. The season starts tomorrow, so go and check them out. Runyourpool.com/lockedon or promo code lockedon at checkout. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrap it up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick look at the New Orleans Saints Week 1 depth chart, an early release. And of course, we'll also talk about Locked On's power rankings and where the New Orleans Saints fell and how I feel about it. So let's talk about the offense. First, wide receiver, no big surprises. Traquan Smith, Marquez Callaway. If Traquan Smith is available and healthy for you, he's your wide receiver too. That's exactly what we expected. Adam Troutman, Garrett Griffin, and then Juwan Johnson on the roster when it comes down to tight end. Now, Juwan Johnson will probably get bumped up a little bit depending upon Adam Troutman's availability. You might actually see Garrett Griffin start along with Juwan Johnson, but we'll have to see how Adam Troutman's health pans out throughout the season. But otherwise, that's pretty much as we expected it. We talked a little bit about the running back position, or quite a bit about the running back position in the last segment, and it's exactly as we expected it. Alvin Kamara, Tony Jones Jr., Dwayne Washington. I don't expect this to change. Tony Jones Jr. with the 21, the number changed to 21 there. And then the New Orleans Saints added a fullback earlier on late last week in Adam Prentice, former Denver Bronco, while Alex Arma is on the practice squad. Now, the New Orleans Saints do not have a kicker on their roster, on their active depth chart at the moment. We talked about why in yesterday's episode, so you can go and check that out. But basically, because of everything going on with the way that you can manipulate with the practice squad, no reason to carry the roster spot. Now, when it comes down to the defense, there are some interesting things here. Starting defensive tackles, Malcolm Roach, Christian Ringo, not Shy Tuttle, who is expected to be the guy at the beginning of the offseason, but Christian Ringo has had a phenomenal offseason. He deserves to be up there. You see the rookie Peyton Turner, first-round rookie by the New Orleans Saints, Marcus Davenport, Carl Granderson, and then Peyton Turner, so third string behind Carl Granderson at the moment. We'll get some injury updates on him later on today as the NFL starts to put out its injury reports for all of the Sunday games here on this Wednesday. Interesting note, and something different than what I expected when it came down to the 5 questions going into this week when we had our first episode on Monday. Who was going to start next to Demario Davis? My expectation was Zach Bond, but right now, at will linebacker, Quan Alexander is listed at the starter. We'll see if that ends up being the case in terms of his injury recovery, of course, but right now listed as a starter and listed with a number change from 58 to 5 over on the linebacker spot. So you have 2 linebackers right now with 5 and 20 as their numbers. I know John Sigler's mad. I'm very happy about it. Just messing with you, John. When it comes down to the cornerback position, it's exactly as we expected. Remember, Bradley Roby will not impact the week 1 depth chart. He will impact the week 2 depth chart because he's serving that suspension. Marshawn Lattimore, opposite him, Ken Crawley. Your punter, of course, is Blake Gillikin. Your long snapper is Zach Wood. Nothing new there. And then, of course, you have to look at your return specialist in Deontay Harris, who is listed as the wide receiver behind Traquan Smith on the roster. The wide receiver right behind Marquez Callaway is Lil Jordan Humphrey. So we'll see which one of them actually gets the slot shares. I would expect that, though, to be Deontay Harris. And, of course, with Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith moving in and out of the slot as well. So that's your depth chart going into the beginning of week 1. We'll see how this molds, changes because of injury reports, because of other information that may come out all throughout the week here as we get closer and closer to our Green Bay Packers matchup in Jacksonville at TIAA Bank Field on Sunday. Now, before we wrap up here today, I want to take a look really quickly at the Locked On Power Rankings. You're going to be doing these every single week, so we'll update them on Wednesdays. Now, usually when we look at power rankings before the season, we're accustomed to, at least here recently, seeing the Saints ranked amongst the top 10. Probably has been that way now since the end of the 2017 season, going into 2018, when things really turned around after 3 straight 7-9 seasons from 2014 to 2016. However, this time around, when it comes to the Locked On Power Rankings ahead of 2021, the New Orleans Saints are ranked 17th. Do I think that's too low? Yes, absolutely I do. Do I think that they need to be top 10? No, not at this time. But do I think that they should be top 15 over teams like the Miami Dolphins, who might have a quarterback, the New England Patriots, who are starting a rookie quarterback, the Washington football team, who's starting Ryan Fitzpatrick, who will quickly go from Ryan Fitzmagic to Ryan Fitztragic very quickly? Yes, I do think that they should be above those spots, but this is okay. The New Orleans Saints do have a lot of question marks. What's going to happen transitioning from Drew Brees to Jameis Winston? What's going to happen over on the defense as the Saints are beginning to really fill out holes now? Really, the one spot that I'm still curious about is the defensive tackle position, interior defensive line. Maybe this would be differently. Maybe this would be a little bit different had this poll been taken after this Bradley Roby trade, or had the Bradley Roby trade happened before the power rankings came out. But regardless, New Orleans Saints will start at 17th on the Locked On Power Rankings. So the Locked On family sleeping on the New Orleans Saints a little bit, not going to lie, but that's all right, because they'll be in for their awakening as this season gets rolling. All right, y'all. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers to break down this upcoming weekend's matchup between the Green Bay Packers, who are going to be visiting the New Orleans Saints, as the New Orleans Saints are visiting Jacksonville, Florida. So it's going to be a ton of fun. We're going to talk about all the biggest stories leading up to this game, going to talk about the key matchups, and then, of course, take a look and break everything down in terms of making our predictions and looking at keys to victory for these two teams as well. So what does a win look like for the Saints? What does a win look like for the Green Bay Packers? We'll talk about it all in tomorrow's episode before we get to our Friday episode, where we put a nice little bow on everything and wrap everything up ahead of the first week 1 action, which is this Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Make sure you check out the Locked On Bets podcast while you've got a moment. Go ahead and win yourself some money with your boy Q and Lee Sterling. We'll be back with you tomorrow here on Locked On Saints. As always, you can catch me for everything in between, though, on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.